welcome back to our show. Today I'm going to talk about Witchfinder General, which is the Mike Reeves film made just before he died. You can see this in this wonderful 88 films cover. I've switched it around so it's not the same thing because I quite like having to be able to see both the old cover and the new cover. This is a 2-discer where you get the 4K with a commentary, and you also get a 2K with some extras on it. This has been remastered very nicely because before Witchfinder General never looked that good. It really did not. It always looked a bit, cheap because it was a low budget film and no one had really put the effort in to make it look really good. So it's always had that kind of tendency to look kind of trashy and a low budget film from what it was. Now you get to see everything, including the fact that some of the wigs are a bit dodgy, which is that's the problem with high definition. You can see all the wrinkles in the face, but you also see the wig lines sometimes that you would never see before. So that's just the way it goes. But the film is wonderful. But I mean, it's the thing with this film is his reputation is of a hardcore, brutal film, and it's really not that. It has its moments, but it's really, there actually is a story there, and the horror is accumulative. The horror is of a situation getting more and more out of control in a war zone that's getting more and more out of control. It's not historically accurate. Mathew Hopkins in reality was in his 20s when all this stuff happened, and he was played by Vincent Price. It's slightly different. So as the script was written, Michael Reeves wanted Donald Pleasence to play the part as a kind of seedy, nasty man. But for funding they needed something bigger, so they went for Vincent Price, which Reeves did not like. So him and Price clashed on the set, and Price hated him and he hated Price. And later on, when he saw the film, Price was actually very, very complimentary of the film. And they said he wished the director had told him what he wanted. If he told him what he wanted, he could have done that without any hassle. But he didn't know what the director wanted. So it was like, it was an issue of communication. And it's one of those situations where I don't think either party was entirely right or wrong. It was just like an inexperienced young director and older leading man. And they just needed someone in the middle who could be the communication thing between them to actually get what was needed. But that didn't happen, so they clashed. But that's not the interesting part of the film. The interesting part of the film is the film. Even though nowadays, in a perfect 4K world, you can see that some of the costumes were hired from a costume shop. And, it's still a very impressive film. It is one of those films that has a really nasty undertone because it is about the idea of what happens when you let the craziness in to basically organised power. You let the crazies in there, a lot of vendettas can be, enacted. A lot of people can take advantage of the system. This has nothing to do with what's going on in the world, honestly. I'm not saying that this could possibly happen in the real world over the next few years. But, human nature in the past and human nature, lock your doors. So, it is about the idea of it. During the British Civil War, where where Oliver Cromwell has, and his Puritans have overtaken the Parliament. They have ousted the king. The king's on the run. There's wars going on all over the south of England. Everything has gone to hell. And if this film happens as the king's on the run, he's lost the battles. He's now on the run. He has to try and escape. And there's still skirmishes going on, but Cromwell's basically in charge. He's still got some battles to fight, but he's in the upturn and the king's in the downturn. So at that point, into this comes a lot of it's a superstitious country already, because James I, the previous king, was very superstitious, and he brought a lot of superstition down from Scotland because he came from Scotland. He was a Scottish king who took over the British kingdom because of blood, basically. And there was a lot of crazy shit going on in Scotland at the time that he brought with him that then came down into England and affected England as well. So England, for the witch trials, you're welcome. So so they'll get into the system. A lot of vendettas were suddenly, oh, it's a witch, rather than, oh, you're just trying something. You're just you're just settling a score. So Mathew Hopkins and his psychic Stern are two guys who go around, have lots of methods of finding witches, and they get paid per witch. Which, of course, how could that system be abused? Oh my. So the subtext of this is that Giles I was a Catholic. He was, and England had become Protestant, and there was a sense of the Catholic Church was a problem for the Puritans, and they wanted rid of it. It was a big thing for like hundreds of years, from Henry VIII onwards. And there was always these tensions about religion, and basically this priest has been targeted because he's a Catholic priest. That's it. That's all it is from his religion. He's idolising false gods to them, even though it's the same god they have. So Mathew Hopkins goes around and he finds witches amongst the poor folk, and he attacks priests and gets them hanged and things like that. And the horror of the film is basically watching Vincent Price at work as this character and how deadly he is. He brings along with him Stern, who's a much more open sadist. He enjoys the torture and lets Stern do all the torture, so that Hopkins as a lawyer can be the authority figure, even though you can tell that Hopkins is getting off on it too. He loves the power, but he's trying to portray himself as the authority figure. He doesn't like women much, but he lusts after them. He's a lot of problems and pretensions, and he's very sense of someone who's fearful he's going to get caught for being who he is. But he's also got a survivor mentality. He'll sacrifice anybody to survive. And he's a manipulator. He's just this toxic person who is just loving taking advantage of all this. So within this setup that's been going on for a while during the Civil War, this was actually a very limited thing that would happened in the south of England. Didn't really spread much beyond there, but it did happen. It was a bit of madness that eventually Hopkins wrote a book that went over to America, and it helped cause the witch trials in America. Again, now America, you're welcome. It all came from Scotland to start with. So, into this situation comes Ian Ogilvy and his prospective wife. And they're the young lovers on the cover. Hilary Dwyer plays the to-be wife, and she's very good in this film, and she's soon on to become a producer. She's one of the producers on Nil by Mouth, and some Mike Newell films and things. So she moved on from acting to producer, probably because it was acting's probably a scumbag industry to start with for young women. So they're going to get married, but the priest tells Ogilvy, okay, you have to marry her. You can marry her. I'll give you permission to marry her because he's looked after her since she was a child. But you have to get her out of here because this place is dangerous. Now, Ogilvy has to go back to where he was stationed to start with because he's only a day or two off. So he says he'll make arrangements, and when he comes back through, they'll get married and get her out of here. Before that happens, Price comes in with his people. They torture the priest, and she has to seduce Price to avoid the priest getting killed, which she does. But eventually, this arrangement is found out by Stern, and Price goes a bit mad and orders the priest to be killed. and she is raped and everything else, and it's this whole mess. And Price acts as if he's been pious, and he's just lived this horrible mess in this town. And he's got various confessions from people, and he's killed people, and he's got his money. So Ogilvy comes back to find this utter devastation, and the story becomes about him from what was originally a kind of young, idealistic soldier who was happy. Into that comes a blood vow to get revenge, because he liked the priest, and he loved his. He marries her and he loves his wife, but he's also, does he love the idea of revenge more? There's something that just eats away at him. It's just this violence that suddenly triggers into him. But also at the same time, he's now fighting a war. So he's also getting corrupted by the violence of the war as he's fighting for the Roundheads against the Parliament. And he becomes a war hero. And he's, at the same time, he's hunting down Price. So he's got this duality to him that's slowly emerging. And it becomes a story about how violence taints everybody. Everyone's corrupted by it. I mean, Price and Stern love the violence and love the cruelty and the power of the violence. You see Oliver Cromwell in one scene, and he's obviously loving having the power and ordering these men around. There's just this sense of this era in England, which looks beautiful, is getting corrupted with this violence and this need for revenge, and it's just this disease that's spreading throughout the land. And eventually everyone's paths cross in this other town where Ogilvy sends his wife to another town to hide till he can find Mathew Hopkins. Price goes to that town to do his job, spots her there, realises that Ogilvy will be on his way if he's warned, and sets a trap for them. And basically all hell breaks loose. Nobody comes out happy. Everybody is either killed or driven mad. It's a tragedy. It's a full-on tragedy. What's good about the film is it does not start off saying this is a tragedy. It's just like, this is a situation, these are the villains, they're complicated, here's the hero, and just slowly by his interactions with Hopkins in his actual life, Ogilvy's character becomes darker and darker. Of course, the irony is, by becoming darker and darker, he becomes far more successful as a soldier. Which is, the thing is, when he first starts out, he's quite weak as a soldier. Once he gets some violence in him, he becomes a much more ruthless fighter. And so the violence seeps into him in ways that are sometimes to do with Hopkins, but sometimes to do with the war he's fighting. And it's just this sense of the corruption within this beautiful landscape of all these people. And it's just this sense of the slow build. For a while, it looks like an adventure film with dark undertones. It's like, we're going to catch this guy and get rid of him. But as the film goes on, the corrupting nature of what Hopkins is doing, the idea that lots of the people are behind him because they hate each other, and everyone's got vendettas over the Civil War and who supports who, and people are stabbing each other behind their backs for everything, and it's just this hellhole of a county because of this war that started with the king versus the Cromwell, and it's just corrupted the whole system. And it's like, this is what happens when a system gets corrupted, when you've got ideologues versus ideologues, and you don't really have a clear view of law and a clear view of this is right, this is wrong, do not do that. And it just becomes this hellhole. But it's a slow build. So when you get to the end, the actual sense is of inevitability by the time you get to the last third, but also it's like, it didn't start out this way, so there's not a sense of doom from the start. So the end's more powerful when he finally cracks. He's been holding together slowly, but as you see him cracking, so the tension is, will he fully crack when he faces, Mathew Hopkins? And yes, he does. And basically, it's like, it's just like the corrupting power of violence. This is just a wonderful film. It's very dark. It's well written. It's got a sense of build to it. It's a sense of slow build of incidents that accumulate. A sense of this evil that's there with Hopkins, this evil there in the towns, this evil that's accumulating through the environment, just slowly builds and builds to a climax. The fact that it's a low budget film, they can't afford that much, does show through in some of the production design at times, but they use a lot of locations that are historical, but some of the costumes and wigs can be a bit cheap looking because it's a low budget film. But that doesn't matter because the power of the film, the performances, the sense of everyone's committed to this story that's told by a director who's doing things filmically is coming through. So it is just a wonderful, wonderful film. I'd highly recommend it, especially now it's been remastered, so it now looks the way it should look. You get some nice extras, but it actually now looks good. It's never looked good before. It's the first time I've ever seen it look good. Always before it's been like, oh, that's the best they can do with the material. This first time was like, oh, this looks actually good. So I'd recommend 88 Films. You can buy the Blu-ray or you can buy the 4K, but it looks good in both. So it's highly recommended. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it encourages you to go see Mathew Hopkins, Witchfinder General. Bye for now.